The Sun newspaper has reported on leaked proposals which show health bosses are preparing to jab children aged between 5 and 11 next spring. Currently, Covid-19 vaccines are licensed in the UK only for children aged 12 and over. The Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency has said they expect the standards of safety, quality and effectiveness must be met before vaccines would be authorised for children in this age category.
Yeah, but what rights will parents have when it comes to giving permission or otherwise to have your children jabbed? Joining us now is Barrister Rebecca Butler. Rebecca, thanks for joining us on the Great British Breakfast this morning. First of all, what's your take on the legal situation here with regards to getting such young children jabbed?
Well, obviously, parental consent already has been sought in the 12 to 15-year-old category, and I can't see that any government would do anything other than request the similar for the primary school children. So I don't see this as an issue at all. Gillick competence doesn't apply to younger children in law. So the current policy with school vaccinations is that parents are informed, and it's at that point that they're entitled to ask that the child isn't vaccinated.
So if there's a conflict between a parent and a child, it's the parent that have the final say until you become to the age of 16, is that right?
No, that's not correct. The test in law is Gillick competence, and Gillick competence really can kick in at about 12. But the important thing to remember about Gillick competence is that a Gillick competent child has the capacity to consent to something. That actually really the consent to not do something is very, very limited in clinical practice. So, for example, if you have a Jehovah's Witness child who's come in after some severe trauma and needs a blood transfusion, that Gillick competent child, if they are deemed to be so, can say, yes, I will have a blood transfusion. The minute they say, no, I won't have a blood transfusion, then the doctors will take the matter to the courts and to judges who operate an on-call system for this very thing. So it's the capacity to say yes is very, very different to say the capacity to say no, but Gillick competence really, really only kicks in secondary age children.
Right. So if you want your child to get the jab, but they're saying no, what do you do then?
Well, that's a problem because, of course, a lot of children turn up and say, no, thank you. They don't want a needle in their arm. A lot of children are scared. But, that's a matter for the schools and that's a matter for the school nurse. I can't see a situation unless the child is really very, very distressed about it. I can't see a situation where a nurse will give a vaccine to a child who is screaming blue murder. But, usually they're told, they know, they're prepared for it, and they'll just stand in line with their friends. And, there'll be a lot of bluster and things like that. But at the end of the day, a child who doesn't want it is going to have it at some point.
Yeah. Can we look at it, if we can, at what's happening in Europe? There have been huge protests in major European cities over the type of restrictions that are being imposed there. What are people's rights? If the government say, you've got to have a jab before you can do a set number of things, like in France, before you go to a restaurant or whatever, do you think there are some cities or some countries in Europe where governments are pushing the limits, really, the legal limits of infringing on the rights of the people who live in those countries?
Well, of course, you're looking at human rights here, but the issue with human rights is there are very few absolute rights, because a government can always justify its acts on the grounds of proportionality under human rights law. So actually the proportional argument is, what are we trying to achieve by doing X or Y intervention? So, for example, look at Austria. Austria going down the lines of mandatory vaccination. They would justify any challenge in the ECHR on the grounds of proportionality, and health and national security are pretty much universally permitted by the Human Rights Court to justify interventions. Austria, by February the 1st, there will be COVID vaccinations. There will be mandatory COVID vaccinations in place. And if it came to court, which I doubt it will, but if it actually came to court, then what the court would be looking at would be the enforcement mechanisms that Austria had put in place and the justification for restricting people's liberties, i.e. those who haven't had their vaccination. So, in France, actually, the COVID passport system, which isn't a vaccine passport system, it's a COVID system, meaning that you have to produce an antigen test or your vaccination certificate, that's actually been massively successful. And because France did it in July, obviously their compliance rate for vaccination has gone through the roof and is now higher than the UK. Ditto Spain, Italy and Portugal. You've got a problem with Germany and Austria, who have been quite complacent, plus the other Eastern Bloc countries. They were extremely complacent over the summer. Now the Delta wave has hit them. We've had Delta. Now Delta has hit them really, really hard, and they've got a big problem. And that's why they've had to do this.
Rebecca, thank you for your time